Welcome to Bliss Hill Victorian town. I come here every year for the past 10 years now, and this is one of the favorite places. It's the best fish and chips. Let me show you. Let me walk you around in all these little shops. I absolutely love coming here. It's not too busy, it's still early, 10:30. The fish and chips is open at 11, so we've got half an hour. I'll show you around in the little shops before it gets really busy. In a couple of hours, this is gonna be so busy. Oh, I've just spotted this book. I love it. It's like stories, activities. How did upper-class Victorian era people earn money? I know that upper-class Victorians didn't work as much as such, and even if they did, then they were either lawyers, doctors, landowners. I'm just curious how landowners received their income. I think landowners generally lived of rents and the interest of their family fortune, if they had any. They'd lease out parts of their land to farmers who would pay them an annual or quarterly sum for it. So some would also invest in factories, trade or other money-making scheme. Generally, if they were very rich, they had a steward, I think that's the right term, who dealt with their businesses and finances, and the less wealthy landowners, they probably lived mostly off of the rents of the tenants and producers of the land. It very much depends on what class of people we are referring to, I think, because the middle class in the Victorian era made their money by working. A prosperous middle class family would probably be the owner or co-owner of a factory or some sort of other business venture. The landowning class made their money from farming, and the tenants farmed the land, and the landowner made money from rent or portion of the farmer's sales, as well as rent from any other businesses on his land. If the landowner was smart and had enough capital, he probably also had investments in businesses like mining, shipping, textile. The time in their office would have spent going over accounts, administrating their land, and writing letters. Victorians had a healthier diet than we do, in my opinion. So let's just recap. So, because what they ate a lot more nutrition-rich food and consumed far less sugar than we do, or processed food, what we really rely on in the present life. A typical breakfast might consist of stone-ground bread smeared with drippings or lard, and they had probably a bunch of watercress with it, rich in vitamins, minerals. There were plenty of cheap seasonal vegetables to be found in the markets, like onion, cabbage, leek, carrot, turnips. So the main fruit what they ate in the winter there were apple and cherries in the summer. The Victorians also ate lots of healthy fiber-rich nuts like chestnut, hazelnuts. They roasted it, or they bought it on a street corner from sellers. Meat was relatively expensive, so they probably could have bought a sheep head for today's money, would have cost them £2.50 British pounds. Instead, they ate plenty of omega-3 rich oily fish like, herrings, eels, oysters, mussels, and as were cod and haddock for us now. Most people did physically demanding jobs, which meant they were active for 50 to 60 hours a week. Victorians suffered less from chronic diseases than we do nowadays. They were 90% less likely to develop cancer, dementia, and it certainly meant that diseases like type 2 diabetes were vanishingly rare. Although they ate far more calories than we do, because they were so active, obese Victorians were relatively rare. William Buntin, a Victorian undertaker, was an exception. He was apparently so fat that he had to go down the staircase backwards. His family were funeral directors to the royal household and oversaw the funerals of the Duke of Wellington, Prince Albert and Queen Victoria herself. William Buntin, however, is chiefly famous for being the first person to popularize a low-carb diet. It says in 1860 that he lost 18 kilograms just cutting out foods such as bread, sugar, beer and potatoes. In the early years of the Victorian era, breakfast would have consisted, if you could afford it, of a cold meat, cheese and beer. In time, this was replaced by a porridge, fish, eggs and bacon. The full English, right? By the end of the 19th century, however, this relatively healthy start to the day was being challenged by manufacturers of sugary breakfast cereals, pioneered by people like Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. The Sunday lunch. For many Victorians, Sunday was the only day of rest. It was also the only day when they would eat meat. So began to custom of buying a small joint of beef, pork or mutton to be shared with the family, accompanied by lots of vegetables, potatoes and gravy. If you couldn't afford roast, you would have liver, tongue or heart. The Victorian era saw the introduction of the 2 or 3 course meals, with the courses arriving in sequences, one at a time. Before that, the courses all tended to arrive at once. How were people paid in Victorian era England, with paychecks or real money? Almost everybody was paid in coin. Sterling was at a time a gold-based currency, and banknotes of less than £5 were not issued during the Victorian or Edwardian era. Few people earned as much as £5 per week, and even if they did, it would be very inconvenient to have a £5 note in one's wages. During the Victorian era, from 1820s to 1914, Britain was a powerful nation with a rich culture. It had a stable government, a growing state, and an expanding franchise. It also controlled a large empire, and it was wealthy, and part because of its degree of industrialization and its imperial holdings, and in spite of the fact that 3/4 or more of its population was working class. Britain began to decline as a global political and economic power, related to the major powers including the United States, but this decline was not actually noticeable until after the World War II. The working class, about 70 to 80% of the population, got its income from wages, with family incomes usually under £100 per year. Working class were strong on their own values. The middle class, which got its income of 100 to 1,000 pounds per year. From salaries, and profit grew rapidly during the 19th century, from 15 to over 25% of the population. During the 19th century, members of the middle class were the moral leaders of society. They were very small and very wealthy upper class got its income from property, rent and interest.
Because sometimes, but if I'm lucky, I can take my finger off. And because I grew up watching Blue Peter, is what I did earlier. Now, I do that to show you roughly how thick each layer of wax is. I know it's gross, but you can touch them if you like, because very good smells that way.
Hello, sweetie. You're so pretty. Oh, sweetie, you're so pretty.
It's $3.20.
This is honestly my favourite bit. Oh, good chickens, look! Composting. That's the outside loo.
Oh, there you go. You were looking for it.
Oh, look at that. It's got a nice cockerel. You are handsome. You're very handsome.
Working class miners cottage, the squatter's cottage. Yeah. There's one down the end of my path there, the toll house. Yeah. That would have been working middle class. Yeah. The one half up the hill you can't go in today is a grotto, but that's the Duke of Sutherland, so that's the upper class. Yeah. And then there's one between the chip shop and the sweet shop. That's a middle class, middle skilled person. They've matched the footprint of the place, but the stones are wherever they could go. Yeah. The roof is exactly how it was up there. So all of these beams and everything, all the hooks that are in there, the chains and things, that's exactly how it was up there. But as I say, originally it was a barn that they've then... And that's the other thing, the mine owner wasn't responsible for any upkeep of the property or any improvements or anything like that. It was all on them. But they've sunk what little money they have into it. And I think that's why probably this little lady didn't leave in the early 70s. She didn't want to. You know, really have the blood, sweat and tears into it. Yeah. But she still lived in it when
so cool.
I think 71, 72.
The feeling is cold.
Well, it's not bad actually. I mean, obviously I've got to keep the door open because I want people to come in and realise that they can come in.
If I live like this, that's what would get me.
When I first come in the morning, I can feel it. I can feel how cold and how damp it is. But once that's been going about half an hour.
There's a compost bin over there. That's a pigsty, I think.
Yeah, it's not far from down to here. Yes. And what you just got up at the moment, because further down is the original incline player, which was built just to transport things from the River Severn to the canal. This was a experienced as well. But when they did this tar tunnel, which is sort of kind of below that, they wanted to make this tunnel, so they thought it would be easier to go underground, and then they could transport the coal out to the River Severn, you see, save having to go from here up to the canal and then go down, you know. Yeah. So they thought they'd make a tunnel that went up to a mile. Yeah. But instead they found all this tar dripping through the surface. Yeah, and that was probably very valuable.
Which is the oldest?
This one actually. This was the one that was moved here first. And it was actually built in 1829, so it is probably one of the oldest buildings actually. Oh no, I'll tell you what, the oldest building is the estate office, which is where one of the Santa Grottos is. It it's been moved. I think it used to be a pub as well.
How did they decide where to put it on this site? Why put it particularly here?
I know. I don't know whether it was haphazard or what, but it seem to fit in quite well, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. 'Cause I thought it was like a train, maybe.
Mm.
But that was a road.
Road. This was the collecting on the road, but it does feel like a station, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but it, you know, it was people.
There was a big difference between rich and poor in Victorian times. Rich people could afford lots of treats like holidays, fancy clothes, and even telephones when they were invented. Poor people, even children, had to work hard in factories, mines, and workhouses. They didn't get paid very much, neither. Much like today, families usually ate 3 daily meals. The main meal in the 1800s, however, was not a large evening meal that is familiar to us today. Rather, it was a meal called dinner, enjoyed in the early afternoon, and supper was a smaller meal eaten in the evening. So this is the piano, babe. It's exactly the piano I would like. Exactly like this. It's locked, but that kind of
Write your name, put it on the tree.
What was it, 11?
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and see you very soon. Bye, friends.